Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit and welcome to this episode. In this episode, I'm going to be sharing with you some of my contemplations for the week of July 17th, 2023. And my invitation for you as we begin here is to allow yourself to receive this information intuitively and also to tune inwards into your own knowing and your own system, as chances are, as I'm sharing a little bit more about what I'm sensing into with regards to the energy as well as the astrology of the coming week, you might find yourself resonating with some things, or maybe something that I say inspire something else within you. And what I would invite you to do is to focus on that and to trust that whatever it is that's kind of coming up for you is what you're supposed to be looking at, specific to you, as we are all walking totally different paths. All right, so let's get to it. I always like to begin with the overview of the astrology, and this week we have one of the busier weeks of the year astrologically. On Monday the 17th, Mercury, which is currently in Leo, will square Jupiter in Taurus. The lunar nodes will enter the Aries-Libra axis, which is quite significant. We're going to talk more about that. And we also have the new moon in Cancer. And the new moon in Cancer will be sextile Uranus in Taurus, and it will trine Neptune in Pisces. On Thursday, the 20th, Sun in Cancer will trine Neptune in Pisces. And then Mars in Virgo will create an exact opposition to Saturn in Pisces. So you may have been feeling a lot of this Mars-Saturn opposition throughout the past week as Mars entered Virgo. But I think it may intensify and it may start to show you what the theme of this particular transit is in this coming week. On Friday, the 21st, Sun in Cancer will be opposing Pluto in Capricorn. On Saturday, the 22nd, Sun in Cancer will square the nodes, which are, as I mentioned, in Aries and Libra. And then the Sun will move from Cancer to Leo, so Leo season officially begins. Venus will go retrograde in 28 degrees of Leo, and Venus will create a trine with the nodes. On Sunday, the 23rd, Pluto in Capricorn will square nodes, Mercury in Leo will square Uranus in Taurus, and Chiron will go retrograde 19 degree Aries, creating a trine to Mercury in Leo. Okay, so that was a lot, as you can see. So when I was feeling into the energy of the week, what I was sensing was that there were kind of two strands of energetic pattern or template or whirlpool that's happening at the same time. On the one hand, I was feeling that there is this sense of the unraveling of a plot that has been building for a while. Tension that has been under the surface may be coming up to be seen, to be felt, to be tended to. And tension is not necessarily bad. Tension is absolutely a crucial, essential element in building strength, right? And tension can also direct us to see and witness what is here for us to really work with, right? To spend a little bit of time with, and what is simply the thing that's passing, right? And on the other hand, I'm also seeing that we are moving into a new direction as well. And this makes a lot of sense. We are kind of beginning the second half of the year, right? We have kind of been, almost a month into the second half of the year. There are a bunch of planets moving into new signs, right? The sun moving into Leo. We have the new moon in Cancer. We have the nodes moving into Libra and Aries. And so there's some new energy here. And so what I would recommend off the bat in terms of how to kind of work with this week is to prioritize slowness, deliberateness, and intentionality, right? What I mean by slowness is, can we lean into the space of asking, what is the wisdom that this situation or this relationship or this particular energy we're working with, what wisdom is it wanting to convey to us, right? What virtues does it want to encourage us to cultivate, right? It's easy, I think, with weeks like these to kind of go into urgency. There may be things coming up, and I'm going to talk more about this as we get more detailed into the astrology, where it will feel really easy to just kind of get pulled into needing to respond right away, right? Respond from a space of like, but I'm gonna defend my perspective, or like that kind of energy. I think is really present in this particular cosmic soup that we're in. And what I mean by practicing deliberateness and intentionality is that really feel into, check in with yourself. What is my intention? What is the energy that I want to show up in within the situation, right? It may be really frustrating because deliberateness and intentionality may kind of take you down a notch, right? It may put you in a space where you're not able to move as quickly as your mind would like to. And it may be deeply potent to navigate the energy that is coming with a lot of care. Because as we are shifting into a new space, right? And as we become aware that we are in a new space, letting ourselves have a little bit of extra distance between where we are currently, what we're feeling, versus how we're responding may be really powerful. So this is not really a time to fully internalize all of the information that are coming through as our own information, right? We are more porous than we would like to believe as human beings, and we're impacted by a lot of things. And whenever we have astrology that is like this week, what tends to happen is that we get a lot of new information. And some of that information are really valid and solid information, things that we are here to work on and to work with. And others may just be noise, may just be temporary noise that we're just kind of here to weather through, right? And more specifically, there are two reasons why I would kind of recommend practicing a bit of, I wouldn't say non-attachment, I would say practice a little bit of distance, right? And creating space for yourself between things coming to your field and how you want to respond to it. Reason number one is we have a lot of planetary movements this week, right? As I mentioned, we have the node shifting into Libra Aries, and it activates a bunch of aspects, right? That shift specifically. The nodes have been in Scorpio Taurus since January 2022, so the shift here may be felt quite strongly. The nodes will stay in Libra Aries until January 2025, so consider that what comes up this week is kind of like the overture, right? If any of you are opera fans, you will find that the overture can be quite different than the rest of the opera, right? Themes within the opera may be conveyed somewhat within the overture, but just because it's there, it doesn't mean it's going to play out the way you think. You can apply the same analogy to like TV series or movies, right? Just because there was a scene that really caught your attention during watching the trailer doesn't mean that that scene is going to develop the way you think it will, right? And it's really hard to tell just by watching the trailer how the movie is going to end. Sometimes you're correct, sometimes you're not correct. So just kind of being in that space, priming yourself for receiving information, noticing information, especially when you don't feel a powerful internal pull to respond, right? There are things that we feel really powerfully, especially if we've been working on them for a while. You can kind of feel the deeper energetics of it, right? Like some things can feel to me like things that I really need to do from a deep aligned place. And sometimes going for those things can feel really scary, right? Or can feel like a bit of a jump. And then there are others where I feel pulled or sucked into this energy of urgency. Like if I don't respond right now, everything's going to go to shit, or something like that, right? And I think being mindful that you may not have all of the information is important for a week like this coming week. Some of the shifts that we are going to be experiencing are also quite seismic, and this is the second reason why I think it's important for us to kind of let things percolate within our field or just float around for a little bit rather than feeling like we have to jump into it, right? Personally, some of the astrology, the transits that I'm going to be talking about in this episode, I honestly think that we can have hours-long workshops on these shifts, like hours long, right? Today in this episode, I will simply be sharing what I think makes sense for us to kind of know and to digest within this moment, given the particular makeup in the sky, right? But know that some of these transits are really pretty big. And so whenever transits last for a pretty significant amount of time, there are different phases within them, right? And how you feel about something that comes up that kind of feels like it may be kicked up from this transit may make sense for you to respond to, may make sense for you to kind of work with, and others may not make sense, right? So trust that there will be other phases coming, there will be other chapters coming. You are only reading the first chapter of the book, right? And it might just take some time for you to actually know what the storyline is. All right, so let's get deeper into the astrology. First, let's talk about the nodes, the lunar nodes entering Aries and Libra. So to me, in a nutshell, this transit is an initiatory path to train us into themes around self and the other, raw impulses and diplomacy, right? Which is the social lubricant necessary to kind of integrate impulses into something digestible and health promoting for a larger ecosystem, right? Aries is associated with the bold, the brave, the spontaneous inner child. There's a warrior-like quality to how Aries enters a space and makes its presence known, right? Aries has this propensity to assert its own will, its own energy, its own agenda, its own presence and perspective, right? Whereas Libra is kind of the graceful diplomat, right? The refined artist and communicator, the wordsmith. So there is a quality of refinement with Libra. The lunar nodes, to me, speak to incarnational experiences, right? The lunar nodes are calculated points in the moon where eclipses happen. So the movement of the nodes into new signs can be significant, and they can be felt quite strongly because they involve the two luminaries, right? The two bodies in the heavens that we know for a fact directly impact us. The sun gives life to all life forms, right? Like without the sun, there wouldn't be plants. Without plants, we wouldn't have anything to eat. And without anything to eat, we wouldn't be here, right? And so the sun impacts us on a very direct level. The moon, similarly, influences the ebbs and the flows of our internal waters as well as external waters, right? So kind of bringing all of this together. One way to think about this movement into Aries-Libra polarity is in considering, where can my personal desires naturally and spontaneously be met with receptivity, with grace by the social ecosystems in my life? Where do I need to do a bit more work in order to promote receptivity? Where do I know, or do I think I know, I will be met with resistance? And where might I perceive or receive others' disdain? And what's my relationship with this resistance? So I know that's a lot, right? Let me break this down a little bit. The reason why I think this is really important to consider is because we impact one another as humans, right? Whether we like it or not, we are always inextricably part of a social fabric, and we will always impact others. Our awareness and our willingness to embrace our impact are not instantly equivalent to caretaking other people's reactions or big feelings about our impact. So what I mean by that is that, sometimes caretaking or engaging in a dialogue to make sure that other people are on the same page as us is absolutely necessary. Sometimes that is part of living as, for lack of a better term, adults, right, in this lifetime. And other times it's really not. And I think cultivating discernment around how to hold the fact that we impact one another, and also to understand the limits or the boundaries of actually caretaking and trying to fix what we notice as problems or as big feelings coming up in another person's field when we are engaging as ourselves, right? That's a really powerful work, I think impacting others happen on a very real embodied nervous system level, right? And acknowledging that just our presence, just the mere fact of our existence impacts others, and that we are impacted by others can be a really healthy baseline from which we can appreciate our inherent relationality, right? To add to this, something I also like to think about with Aries and Libra is how Aries is a sign that's ruled by Mars and Libra is a sign that's ruled by Venus, right? And with Mars and Venus, what I think is really interesting to think about is the fact that both of them speak to a certain level of corporeality. Is that right? Corporality. Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. There's a certain corporality to Mars and Venus. Like Mars and Venus are not just kind of floating up in the ideas realm, right? Mars and Venus get really deep into the flesh. Mars and Venus is what I would call the personal range, right? There's something about Mars and Venus that is really specific, that is really connected and tied to our physical body systems, to our preferences, our personalities, the way that we have kind of, how we sit within this meat suit that is our bodies, right? And it's interesting because thinking about the other Mars-Venus ruled signs, right, Taurus and Scorpio, I think that speaks more, Taurus and Scorpio can speak more to like our environment as well as our relationships with our ancestors, right? And the more subconscious realm that we carry or we inherit from our ancestors. And so the connection between Taurus Scorpio and Aries Libra is really interesting. First of all, I think it's really intense, right? Like when we're moving, the nodes are moving from Taurus Scorpio, which it's been in since, I believe, I just mentioned this a moment ago, I believe in 2022, right? January 2022. To now, I think what is probably really present in this shift from Taurus Scorpio to Aries Libra is that the Mars Venus theme continue to be existent, continue to be present in the collective energy, right? And it's also worth mentioning that Taurus and Scorpio are nocturnal signs, and then Aries and Libra are diurnal signs, right? So the energy is very different. There is more of like an outwardness to Aries Libra that, Taurus Scorpio may kind of, it's just a slightly different genre, right? Like Taurus Scorpio we can think of as like opera, and Aries Libra is much more like punk, right? It's much more in your face, or it can be. And so I think this is kind of an extended lessons that we have with Mars and Venus, around how do we be people who live in bodies, right? How do we be people who have our own preferences, and that those preferences often brush up against other people's preferences, right? What do I need, or what can I do, or what is part of my responsibility in terms of priming others when I want to influence others, and when I'm aware that my presence, my preference, my direct communication will impact other people, and to what extent is priming others not really my business, right? To what extent is priming others simply a way for me to control the outcome, in ways that are not really regenerative for us, right? So, the other thing I want to mention about the nodes specific to this week is that the Sun will square the nodes from Cancer, and Pluto will square the nodes from Capricorn, right? And so here we have an activation of all of the signs of the cardinal cross, right? Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, and Aries are all cardinal signs. Cardinal signs are kind of like the motor engine of our lives, right? Cardinal signs start things. And so in order to be able to start things, they have to kind of break grounds. And so what we don't talk a lot about sometimes in like pop astrology, right, is how cardinal signs can be really forceful. There's something that is part of the gift of cardinal signs that can feel really pushy, that can feel really disruptive, that can feel quite jarring, because some of them, I think I'm specifically thinking about Cancer and Libra, right? We kind of associate in pop astrology, in our minds, in the collective way that we talk about Cancer and Libra. When I think about Cancer, I kind of see, the crying emoji, right? Or like the sparkly eyed emoji. And then sometimes with Libra, there's like the nail polish emoji, right? Like Cancer and Libra are often considered pretty benevolent signs. Like there's this kind of a grace to them. And I think that's absolutely true. But, thinking about Cancer, for example, we can consider cardinal water, right? Water that moves, water that propels, as like the quality of like breaking the dam, right? Breaking the dam that's been held back for a while. Cancer is water that moves, and in its movement, it carries relative strength. Even the most weighty, rooted, settled rock can absolutely get swept away by a raft that suddenly fills up a pathway and then turns the whole thing into a river, right? That's what I think of Cancer. With Cancer, there's a bit of a, hold, and then suddenly it's like, right? Like there's force, and it just kind of lets itself out a little bit, And I think with Libra, it can be the same too. There is a sense that with Libra, how do we hold the inherent social tension, right? Thinking about Libra as an air sign connected to the ways that we socialize with one another. How is it that we hold inherent tension even just in playing the roles that we have assigned ourselves, or we have been assigned to by society, right? Like thinking about, for example, the teacher-student relationship. There's absolutely tension there, right? Thinking about the relationship between two lovers who are not the same people. There is bound to be tension, right? And in all relationality, there is tension. So, I think these are some of the things to think about with the cardinal cross, right? With the activation of the cardinal cross, we may feel an intensification into, or a shift into, our desire to want to get things moving, And again, this is related to what I was saying earlier with regards to urgency, right? When this particular cardinal cross is activated, it may feel like, I gotta get moving, I gotta get things done, right? I gotta do something, even if I don't necessarily know where this is gonna lead me to, I gotta do something. Again, this isn't necessarily good or bad, right? But it's important to be aware that this energy is present, because it's really helpful to use this energy to jumpstart new habits. If you've been desiring to do so, right? It's great to start new habits. Like maybe you want to be more direct with the people around you, This energy may help you. There may be more of an internal desire to actually do that, to actually act in accordance with your desire. My recommendation in working with this energy, if you're noticing this coming up, is actually to just do it, and let the process teach you what you need to learn, right? It may be a little bit messy, and it will definitely be emergent. Use the energy to kind of get going rather than to get stuck in planning mode, right? Allow yourself to begin imperfectly. Last thing I'll mention about this particular configuration is that Sun in Cancer opposing Pluto in Capricorn may be bringing power struggles rooted in trauma connected to primary caretakers. So, when we think about Cancer and Capricorn, I think about Cancer as related to the womb, right? And Capricorn as related to the structures that are needed to promote aliveness, right, in this lifetime. So you can think of Cancer as being the womb and Capricorn as being like the house, right, within which the child can grow up in, or something like that. Or you can think of it as Cancer relating to the family home, and then Capricorn relating to the money, right, that can help pay the bills, or the exchange, in maybe money culture that is necessary to sustain survival and livelihood within that home, right? And so what I mean by that is, on a deeper archetypal level, whenever we have, the sun and Pluto, one can also think of as the sun being kind of ruling the land of the living, right? And Pluto as ruling the land of the underworld, right? And the underworld here is not the same as hell in Christianity. The underworld here is literally just the land of the dead, right? And so there is, I think, whenever we have an opposition, there is a little bit of tension between the two, right? And so some of the things that you may come across this week may feel much bigger than what's right in front of you. You may notice yourself reacting in ways that are wow, the way I reacted to that was pretty extreme. When literally the person just said something in passing that I'm sure wasn't meant to be a jab at me, but why am I getting so heated and so activated by this, right? And so it may be important and useful for you to check in with some of these original woundings, so to speak, right? And if this is already showing up big time for you, my recommendation is to get really clear and really honest with yourself, right? And take proactive steps. Maybe what feels right for you is to call up your therapist, and schedule an additional session. Or maybe schedule time to talk to a friend that you trust who can help you talk about some of the things that are coming up in ways that are reciprocal and consensual, right? And respectful of your friend's time and energy. This may be really helpful to kind of plan ahead of time if you're already seeing this showing up in your life. Okay, moving on. We have also the new moon in Cancer, and this new moon in Cancer creates a sextile, right, which is a 60-degree angle to Uranus in Taurus, and creates a trine to Neptune in Pisces, which is a 120-degree angle. Both Uranus and Neptune are outer planets, right, and they, to me, symbolize forces that can feel outside of our control, right, outside of our full and immediate control. Sextile and trine, though, are totally harmonious aspects, right? And what that means, and this is, I think, really important, is that harmonious aspects are not necessarily experienced as easeful. They're not necessarily experienced as benevolent, right? But they go along with, they amplify what the thing is already bringing. So in this case, right, because we're talking about the new moon in Cancer, we might find that this sextile to Uranus in Taurus and this trine to Neptune in Pisces amplifies more of the Cancerian, right? Brings up more that the Cancerian probably won't be able to express or manifest without the intervention or the collaboration of these particular energies, right? So when we're thinking about the new moon, I also like to think about new moons as, something being seeded, right? When you look up at the sky and you try to see a new moon, you often can't see the moon at all, right? Doesn't mean that the moon isn't present, but it does mean that the moon is kind of hidden from our perspective here on Earth, right? So I think there's a symbology there too to contemplate, because whatever is being seeded, right, may also be deeply entangled with the collective energy that the Uranian and the Neptunian brings in, right? This to me is a great time to be working with spirit, to be working with the energy of the universe, with benevolent ancestors on intentions that you may have that have to do with promoting emotional health, whatever that looks like for you, right? Here are some of the questions to contemplate for this coming new moon. What have I been learning throughout Cancer season about my needs as they pertain to sustaining and cultivating my emotional well-being? What are some of the habits? What are some of the stories, emotional postures that at this point I know I can safely release in order to bring in more spaciousness, to bring in more ease, to bring in genuine care for myself and the world around me, right? And similarly, what do I need to fortify? What do I need to practice more of? What do I need to expand in my own reality to achieve true emotional nourishment, right? So here's an example. I've been learning the importance of not making something a small deal when it's actually a big deal for you. Because this is a form of lying, right? When something is really important for you, maybe you just turn in the first draft, to like a really important paper or a really important book that you are working on, right? Or maybe you have just released a beautiful creative project out into the world. Or maybe you were moving through a particularly gnarly but ultimately satisfying personal healing spiral, right? It doesn't do anybody any good for you to pretend like this is not a big deal to you, right? This is a pattern that I've seen in my own life. So this is just an example. Again, everybody has their own different emotional patterns. Yours may be the complete opposite of mine, or maybe this doesn't even make sense to you. If so, kudos to you, right? But I come from a culture where I've been taught, you need to be humble, right? You can't show too much of yourself. Don't be a problem for other people. Don't bother other people with your problems. And so what I've learned in kind of growing up with some of these constrictions is I've learned to minimize the majorness of some of the things that are happening to me, right? The accomplishments as well as the struggles, and I think being honest with yourself about what something means to you is the first step. And then see whether you can communicate that properly, and to ask the people around you for what it is that you need. Because oftentimes, I think relational tension, unnecessary relational tension, I want to kind of make it clear, right, that there are relational tensions that are absolutely necessary, absolutely alchemical, and they can really turn into something incredible. And then there are other times where we go through some sort of relational tension and we're like, you know what? We didn't have to go through that. If we navigate this with a bit more maturity and a bit more care and a bit more honesty, it doesn't have to be a big deal, right? So then when things are a big deal, it kind of becomes annoying, you know? And it's like, that's not a problem, right? We live and we learn, but also getting really clear about what are the things that are important to us, what parts of our journey we truly want sincere witnessing around is really important, because what you get out of your relationships and the emotional support that you get from the people around you are absolutely determined by what you are willing to ask for. You know, ask and you shall receive, right? Without you asking, you're not giving pathways for other people to provide it to you, and you're not giving pathways for yourself to actually receive, right? And so this, to me, pretending like something is a small deal when it is a big deal, is a coping mechanism, and sometimes that's the best we can do, and there's no shame in that, absolutely. But when we become aware of this pattern, the question is, does that promote emotional health, right? Does that promote genuine emotional nourishment? You know, and if the answer is not, then how can you increase your chances at having an ecosystem, right, around you, a social ecosystem that actually promote rather than depress or repress your access to emotional health, right? By you not taking responsibility for how much something is a big deal to you, you decrease your chances of getting an honest, genuine response from other people, right? Because you weren't honest and genuine with yourself about your ask, about where you are, about how you're feeling, you know, and what you're experiencing in this moment, right? So, to be clear, this is not a call for emotional perfectionism. Such things do not exist, right? We cannot do everything perfectly. That just is not even in the cards. But to allow a little more of your spontaneous emotions to come through, right? And then to maybe even, if you feel like it, take this next radical step of being really honest with yourself about what is it that you're actually asking people to do here, you know? I do think that this is such a practice of liberation, because oftentimes we have unspoken and untended to and not yet witnessed parts of us that actually yearn for a certain kind of response from other people, right? Maybe we just want to be celebrated. Maybe we just want to be witnessed. Maybe we just want to be held. Maybe we just want to be encouraged, you know? And so I think this is part of cultivating emotional maturity, right? Cultivating emotional skills that are necessary to create the kinds of connections that actually build one another up, you know? Saying things like, hey, I'm really down right now. I could really use some encouragement. Do you have 20 minutes to listen to me and to encourage me, right? That can feel like such a vulnerable ask, because we haven't been taught to normalize that way of communicating. But it can absolutely be so healing for both people, because on your end, what you're doing is you're getting really clear with yourself and in your ask about what it is that you need, right, at this moment, and what it is that you're about to do. And on the side of the other person, right, the person who is holding space for you, if they're a friend, if they want the best for you and they love you deeply, there's nothing they want more than to show up in a way that is appropriate to you, that aligns with your expectations, right? That aligns with your needs. And what you're doing is so compassionate to them because you're taking the guesswork out of all of this, right? And so these are some of the things that I think we can think about with regards to this new moon around, if I think about this idea of creating environments that promote my emotional health, my emotional well-being, what does that actually look like? What are some of the prerequisites here, right? What are some of the maybe really feeling into what are some of the societal norms that prevent that from being a reality, right? Thinking about Uranus or thinking about the Neptunian, you can also consider what are the ways in which we have been taught to water down the intensity of our experience. And is that actually serving us in the moment? Is that serving us? Is that serving our relationships? Is that serving the people around us who love us, right? Yeah. The last thing I will mention about this, and I think this is a perfect segue to Venus retrograde in Leo, is that authenticity naturally creates tension, right? There can be a sense, and I think this is more of a implicit message that we sometimes get from, spiritual communities, being in spiritual communities, or kind of looking at spiritual memes on Instagram, that authenticity is sold as this product that will solve all of your problems, right? This is absolutely not true. Just look at artists, public figures who are deeply authentic in their process, right? Most of them bring some level of projection into their field, or their authenticity and them living true to who they are brings up a lot in other people, right? This is normal. This is healthy, in my opinion, because this tension can really teach us what we are here to digest as an individual, right? And what we're here to release, to let go of, There is no way you can go into the hotel rooms of other people's opinions and control their opinions for them, right? Like, I think about other people's opinions as being these individual hotel rooms that they're currently in, and I'm not going to go into those hotel rooms adjusting the temperature for them, right? That's an invasion of privacy. Other people are allowed to have their opinions of you. Other people are allowed to have their feelings about you, right? Now, whether you allow them, or you mandate to them, or you create this boundary that they have to treat you with respect regardless of what they think about you and regardless of what is kicked up within them, is up to you, right? You are the one who has the agency to be like, I am not okay with someone treating me like this. I am not going to respond. Or I'm going to tell the person, this is not how you treat me. I do not like to be treated this way. Don't do that, right? You can do that with firmness and with compassion, That part is absolutely within your periphery of agency, right? However, it's not your job to be managing what people feel about you. And the more you live into your truth, the more you will see that this comes up, and the more this doesn't have to be a problem, right? You can notice it. You can be discerning around, is this something that is here for me at this moment to process or not? If it's not something for me to process, I can move on without making it too big of a story, right? And now let's talk about Venus retrograde in Leo, because I think this is getting right to the heart of Venus retrograde in Leo, right? Venus is the patron saint of relationality, right? Venus is associated with the ways we experience beauty, connection, pleasure, among other things, right? And therefore, Venus also speaks to the ways that some of these things can absolutely get distorted, you know? Venus speaks to the challenges around noticing and embracing beauty, right? The experience of disconnection, the experience of how pleasure and our desire to experience pleasure may really trigger us, right? And in the sign of Leo, ruled by the sun, which is the organizing principle of the solar system, the star at the center of our solar system, this Venus retrograde may bring into question experiences around centering the self, right? Like, how much can I center myself? How much am I allowed to be in my own innate light and to let it shine through and radiate? And what are some of the ways to not only have that be well received by others, but perhaps also recognizing the ways that our light and radiance impact other people, right? Like, what are the different ways that our desire to be our authentic self impact people, you know, and how does it ruffle up whatever is ruffled up in other people, right? When we center ourselves, our needs, our desires, what really moves us on a personal heart level, I think it's a very common experience that we will bump up against reactions of others that don't align with our expectations, right? In my own personal cosmology, I don't know if it ever makes sense for me, this idea that we can ever decenter ourselves, right? I think the reality is that we are always at the center of our own universe. It is impossible for us not to center ourselves. Think about this from a sensorial perspective, right? We are literally processing the world through our eyes, through our brain, through our bodies, right? And so we can learn to cultivate sensitivity towards other people's experiences. And I think that is extremely, extremely important, right? And for some of us, this kind of sensitivity is a built-in mechanism, right? We may be extremely sensitive to the ways that others perceive our actions or how others feel when we say something from, from when we were born. For some of us, that's just how we are. But that doesn't mean that you're not on some level still filtering through your own perceptions, right? There is something about the way that we are built as humans where we cannot 100% escape our experiences. Which isn't to say that deep mystical experiences, right, of communing with the unseen others, right, the guides, the ancestors, the energy of the planets, right? It doesn't mean that these deep mystical experiences are not possible. It doesn't mean that people cannot be in this deep union, right, with one another as humans. But no matter what, even the most merged experience is always going to be filtered through your lens, right? And so if that's the case, what do we gain by owning our lens, right? How do we allow our unique lens, our specific contribution, to be something that's nutritive for ourselves and for others? How do we cultivate the capacity for connection, even when connection doesn't look like fully agreeing with one another, right? Or being in total harmony? One last thing I will say about the Venus in retrograde in Leo, and we're only really at the beginning portion of this, right? Because this goes into fall. One of my teachers, Diana Rose Harper, once said to me in a session something to the effect of, what makes you believe that dimming your light actually facilitate others in shining theirs more brightly, right? What makes you think that you hiding your gifts, downplaying your gifts, are actually going to facilitate others in making their gifts known, right? Or having their gifts be accessible to others out there, you know? This is something that I think has been a deep contemplation for me in the past few years. And there are absolutely lots of nuances around that, right? Because as you're hearing me say that, some things may be really kicked up for you. You know, a lot of us have experiences of being marginalized on some level, right? And so when we've had that experience, we might find that we are not necessarily like we don't have space, you know, we might have had the experience of not having space to have our light be experienced by other people, right? And I want to validate that experience. And so when we've had this experience of being marginalized, sometimes it can feel like, oh, I cannot put myself in the center because then I will be the oppressor by definition, right? So something that I would like you to really consider and think about here is that true? Or is it more nuanced than that? Are there different circumstances where maybe you taking a step back and being in a listening space, right, is the most nutritive way for you to actually center yourself, right? Centering yourself doesn't have to look like being on stage, you know, singing that solo tune, right? Centering yourself can mean really checking in within and asking, what is appropriate for me right now? What am I truly being called to do? How am I truly being called to respond outside of what my mind thinks are the ways that I need to respond or I should respond, right? So yeah, I'm going to leave you with that and let you kind of ruminate on that, and we can continue to talk about it because the Venus retrograde will continue to unfold. All right, so that's it from me by way of contemplation. I know that's quite a lot, and I hope that this week can feel relatively easeful for you. I don't even know if easeful is the right words, to be honest with you. I think what I hope is for you to allow yourself space and spaciousness to process and to be with whatever is coming up in this coming week. This kind of week may feel like a lot for other people. This kind of week may just feel like kind of nothing, you know, and trust your experience. Allow yourself to be in your experience and stay with your experience and see what happens when you stay with your own experience. If you would like to have one-on-one sessions with me, I would be excited to hold space for you for whatever you're moving through, for whatever transition you may feel yourself moving through. Doing these one-on-one sessions have always been the most gratifying work I think that I do as an astrologer, as an energy worker, as an Akashic Records practitioner. I would absolutely love to see you in session if you feel called, if you feel like it would be nutritive and supportive for you. And yeah, I think that's it from me. And one last thing I will say is that if you feel like doing some breathwork practices or doing some meditation practices can be really helpful for you, I would love to direct you to my friends at Open App. They do such a great job. I've been meditating, practicing with them for a while now, and I really, really love their work. And so I welcome you and I invite you to check their work out. And I think that may be a really helpful support for this kind of week. And I have a code in the show notes you can access below for 30 days for free. All right. That is it from me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for contemplating this week. And I am sending you so much love. Until we meet again, I hope you take good care of yourselves. Thank you.